Okay, this lecture is going to cover pricing. The objectives of this lecture is to learn basic vocabulary of financial decision making in relation to the product development process and understand the role of product development staff in financial decisions of a firm. The profit and loss statement tracks information that results in a profit and loss statement. It's a simplified chart that provides a skeleton outline of accounting categories to show status of the business. So here's an example of a profit and loss statement. The company is the College Shop. And they've got up here their sales, total sales, less cost of goods sold, gross profit, and then all the other operating expenses. So this is just one example of how an income statement or a profit statement would look. Here's another example of a profit and loss statement over a couple years, so you can track the progress. So starting up here, there's 2005. Here are the revenues, sales, cost and expenses, income from operations. And here's all the information from 2005, from 2006, and 2007. So you can easily see the progression of growth or net income. There's two main formats that are used. The first one is productivity of one season with another season. And they compare seasons based on the dollar or monetary values. And then another way is through business to business and examine percentages. So example, percentages of sales. And the figures are used to evaluate the firm's performance for past season. And it provides a basis or a foundation for preparing next season's strategies in regards to the financial plan. Here's another example of a profit and loss statement. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to format it. This one here is formatted by month. So starting at the top, you can see here's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. They have how much they sold, the cost of sales, their gross profit, and then percentage of sales, their direct expenses, interest income, profit before taxes. So profit and loss statements can get really complicated and pretty detailed. Here's another example of how companies compare, like on the stock market. So here you can see that Aaron's volume was 1.3 billion. Their operating income was 78.6 million, and their net profit margin was 5.93%. And this is a great way for companies to compare the net profit margin. So down here, Costco's at 1.73, and you can compare that to Walmart, where they're up at 3.62. When we're talking about net sales, it's revenues taken in by a firm after all returns and other required adjustments have been subtracted from the gross revenue, revenue taken in during a specific time period. So for example, like 6 months. So you could say the net sales for 6 months have been $300,000. And if companies use percentages, net sales are always going to be 100%. All other amounts on the profit and loss statement are referenced back to the net sales figure. Another word that is used frequently in pricing is cost of goods sold, or abbreviated COGS. Cost of goods sold typically drives developers' involvement with financial matters, and this includes variable costs and fixed costs. Variable costs increase at a constant rate relative to labor and capital. Variable costs include wages, utilities, materials used in production. And we'll go over these in a little more detail. Fixed costs often include rent, buildings, machinery, etc. For example, your rent won't increase during the time you've signed a lease. It'll be the same amount during that time. So that is a fixed cost under a determined time period. Cost of goods sold is the actual or estimated cost of finished goods and or the materials needed to produce a product. At the wholesale level, this includes direct labor and indirect labor. Direct labor is work involved directly in making the product. That's your direct labor. Also sometimes referred to as touch labor. Some examples of these are assembly operator, fabrication operator, testing operator. Like these people are physically involved in the labor of a garment. Indirect labor, those are people that have supporting activities that do not contribute directly in making a product. So for example, like a material handling operator, a support technician or an engineer, or like facilities manager or a janitor. Okay, so gross margin is what's left after the cost of goods sold is subtracted from net sales. So for example, 40 to 60% of a firm's net sales have been spent on the cost of producing a garment. That leaves a gross margin of 40 to 60% out of 100. So here's an example that I like to use. So the retail cost of a cup of coffee is $3.50. The cost to make the coffee is $1.05, and it is marked up $2.45 extra cents. So that is the margin. So the cost of the good is $1.05, and therefore their profit margin is 70% because that's $2.45. Total cost $3.50. Operating expenses for producers include sales, marketing, cost of discounts and chargebacks, and corporate overhead. When we're talking about a gross margin, that indicates how well businesses are doing in maintaining their margins for a specific time period. Around 50% reflects positive business climate. Lower than 40% is typically a concern. A contractor with low costs may be able to survive on a gross margin as low as 25%. One with fancy corporate headquarters may need a much higher gross margin in order to counteract the costs of the high-end corporate headquarters. Profit is a word that you hear a lot, and it's the bottom line of any business statement, and profit must be positive. If a final figure is negative, the business is losing money and must make a turnaround, or they'll go out of business. The average profit of apparel business is closer to 4 to 8% of net sales. Pricing strategies. Price is the revenue collected from a consumer or customer. So that's like your actual retail price. Consumer of a manufacturer is typically a retailer. So a retailer goes to a manufacturer and says, I want this, and then the consumer of a retailer, or the customer of the retailer, is the consumer. Cost, the value expended to produce or acquire a garment style. So price must exceed cost by enough for the firm to make a profit. Companies have to consider strategies used to establish prices. You can't just willy-nilly say, oh, I want to sell this garment for $20. So basing price solely on the cost of goods and adding a set markup, for example, doubling the cost of goods to achieve a price, that's an unrealistic market view. Here's a couple ways to do it. Demand-based pricing. This considers the value customers place on the manufacturer or the retailer's reputation and its product. So for example, J.Crew could make a pencil skirt for $15, but they know that their customer places value on that company and their reputation. So J. Crew could sell it for $80, and that would be more than double the cost of the good. A couple other pricing strategies is status prestige pricing, and this is where you put cost, make an item fairly expensive based on the theory that customers value styling and the prestige of the brand or the designer line and the overall image it portrays. The market penetration pricing is where you set the price as close as feasible to other companies that are selling similar items in order to maximize volume of the sales. And that way you can take away sales from other firms and gain market share. Market pricing is where you price to match competitors for the same target customers. Excuse me. Companies may have to employ brand names, advertising, and related cost strategies to compete for market share. Okay, when we talk about retail pricing, some other words that are used frequently is markup. And markup is the amount added to the cost of goods to arrive at the final price. Manufacturers add markup to a wholesale price to arrive at a consumer's ticketed price or retail price. And price is the revenue collected from customer in exchange for ownership of a product. Cost is the amount paid to acquire the product. Wholesale pricing. Cost is a major concern, as well as three other components. The markup needed to sustain profitability, thorough knowledge of the consumer, knowledge of prices and practices of competition, and target market pricing, which I know we already talked about, but it's a version of the market pricing, and it's where you price the merchandise, or it's priced at what merchandisers perceive the market will bear. So it's not priced to compete with others. It's just how much do you think you can charge for this item. Discounts and allowances. List price is a manufacturer's suggested retail price or amount determined by the product developer that's closest to the value. Discounts and allowances are reductions in list price granted by manufacturers to retail customers. Trade discount is percentage, typically 50%, subtracted from list price to establish wholesale price, and the retailer actually pays the manufacturer.